Annie and her fiancé, Luke, embark on a quest for new knives while discussing their upcoming wedding in 6 weeks. However, Annie's thoughts take an unsettling turn as she envisions holding 2 bloodied blades and her husband's demise. Swiftly snapping out of her dark daydream, she refocuses on the shopping excursion. She asks if they can get pizza. While her boyfriend goes to use the restroom, he comes back to find the table empty. Surprised, he asks his girlfriend what happened. She lies and blames everything on the waiter, claiming the waiter spilled liquid on the table, forcing her to clear it. It becomes clear that Tiffany hasn't fully dealt with the traumatic events of her past. Later, anxiety grips Annie as she and her friend Nell ride the subway, triggering flashbacks of a break-in and a gunshot through a window. Despite the unsettling memories, Annie perseveres. Employed at the women's magazine, Annie is a woman who appears to have it all. She has constructed a seemingly perfect life by telling people what they want to hear. Engaged to a successful and attractive man named Luke, she dedicates herself to her job. While her current work involves writing articles about intimate topics such as how to give a good blowjob, her boss consistently assures her that they will soon make the move to the New York Times, promising a step up in her career. Aaron, a documentary filmmaker who probes her about the deadliest private school shooting in history. The revelation that Annie's full first name is Tiffany adds a layer of complexity. Aaron, uncovering a different perspective on the shooting, seeks Annie's insights for a documentary led by a man named Dean. Uninterested in involvement with Dean or the project, Annie dismisses Aaron after their meeting. Post-discussion, she researches Dean Barton to uncover more about his background and intentions. Dean, the individual mentioned by Aaron, accuses Tiffany of involvement in the school shooting. Dean himself is a survivor of the tragic incident and is currently running for Congress. The narrative then shifts to a young Annie, ready to start her journey at Brently Private School, the site of the shooting. On her first day, she leaves a lasting impression on those around her. Young Dean, a popular figure, is introduced, along with other characters like Peyton, Liam, and Olivia. Arthur, another character, guides Annie away from the toxicity of the popular group. The story delves into Dean's experience on a morning news show, discussing how he sustained a spinal cord injury during the shooting, resulting in permanent disability. He advocates for gun control. Luke, Annie's fiancé, advises her not to feel obligated to participate in the documentary. Luke also shares news of a job offer in London, but Annie, feeling close to securing the senior editor position at her current job, is hesitant to leave. In a flashback to the past, at a dance, Arthur gets into trouble for bringing alcohol. Annie, along with Hillary and Olivia, leaves the dance for a joyride with some guys. Andrew Larson, a teacher at the school, attempts to intervene but eventually lets the girls go. While trying on dresses, Annie and her mother, Dina, engage in a heated argument, and Nell questions Annie's readiness to expose Dean for who he truly is, to which Annie appears hesitant. During Annie's Facebook browsing, she encounters a woman named Hannah Ross, who derogatorily labels Annie as a psycho slut. It's revealed that Hannah Ross is the aunt of Liam Ross, a victim of the school shooting. The narrative shifts to a scene where Annie is shown enjoying a good time with Liam. Annie receives unexpected news at work when her boss informs her that they both are going to be featured in the New York Times. Later, at dinner, Annie coincidentally encounters Andrew Larson, her former teacher from the private school, who is also involved in the documentary. Annie envisions an inexplicable scene of stabbing her husband's hand. She fabricates taking a job in London with her husband and engages in a friendly conversation with Mr. Larson while waiting for a cab. During the cab ride, Luke expresses annoyance about Annie lying during dinner. Annie finally confesses to Luke that she got the job at the New York Times and expresses her desire to share her perspective on the school shooting. However, she grapples with fear, realizing she would be challenging Dean, a survivor advocating for gun control, while being a sex columnist. The motive behind Annie's desire to stay in America becomes apparent. She aims to work for a more prestigious news outlet. Through a series of flashback scenes, the story unfolds. Tiffany is a beautiful teenager with a strict mother, attending an elite private school. One night at a party, where everyone is drinking, Tiffany is assaulted by some of the most popular boys at school, Dean and Liam. Young Annie manages to escape to a convenience store, where she encounters Mr. Larson. Sobbing, she tightly hugs him. Mr. Larson takes Annie to his home, attempting to persuade her to go to the hospital and call her mom after reporting the incident to him, but Annie rejects all assistance. She follows him to the headmaster's office. The headmaster seems to doubt Tiffany's recollection and insists that it cannot be reported to the police without involving her mother. Fearing her mother's anger, Tiffany decides to drop it and not press charges. The following day, before meeting Aaron, Annie is startled by loud construction noises. It is revealed that Dean wishes to reconcile with Annie, but she vehemently refuses any association with him and insists on being separate during the interview. Dean alleges that Annie willingly participated in a form of group activity, claiming it was consensual. After the meeting with Aaron, Annie fully embraces the title of victim, wearing it as a badge of honor instead of succumbing to shame. Later, Dean appears on the news advocating for gun control. Annie confides in Nell, expressing her fear of feeling sympathy for Dean when she sees him in his wheelchair. During a gathering with her soon-to-be-in-laws, they discuss their pro-gun stance. Annoyed, Annie walks away, inadvertently offending her Aunt Karen. Her mom, Dina, follows her, initially meant to offer comfort, but ends up warning Annie that the documentary could harm her reputation. Dinah is concerned about Annie being perceived as a promiscuous woman, especially by the in-laws with sons, highlighting her lack of level-headed support. That night, Annie apologizes to Luke, and their intimate moment takes an unexpected turn. Annie, who is rough, apologizes, and Luke expresses his perception that Annie struggles when he tries to be respectful. The movie then shifts back to young Annie, with Liam surprisingly accompanying her. Annie apologizes for the situation, explaining it was unintentional. Liam dismisses the importance of the incident. Annie apologizes again, and the other boys who mistreated her join them at the car. Annie proceeds to school as if nothing has happened, casting a backward glance at Mr. Larson, who observes from a distance. After school, Annie rushes to Arthur's house and reveals that Mr. Larson was fired for letting the girls leave the school dance. Arthur, in turn, discloses a disturbing incident involving Peyton, Ben, and Dean in the woods, leading to Ben cutting his wrists. Ben leaves in anger as Arthur nonchalantly reveals Ben's dark secret. Arthur, now upset with Annie for letting Dean, Peyton, and Liam escape consequences again, expresses his frustration. Annie mentions that her mom can't know, fearing her mother's strong disapproval. Later at school, Dean attempts to provoke Arthur, and Arthur retaliates by tripping Dean. Arthur, frustrated that no one ever tries to stop Dean, engages in a fight with him. A teacher attempts to intervene, but Arthur accidentally hits her during the scuffle. After being suspended, Arthur is upset that Annie apologized to Liam. Annie, in turn, becomes upset and labels Arthur a loser. In the present timeline, the older Annie returns to her old school for the documentary interview. She recounts the events of the fateful day, remembering looking at Dean's neck before a loud explosion occurs. The blast throws students across the room. Annie, with the help of a friend, finds refuge upstairs in a room where they attempt to barricade themselves. It is revealed that Ben is the gunman, and he shoots Olivia as she tries to call for help. During the interview, Aaron questions if Ben calling Annie's name meant they had an understanding. Annie asserts that both she and Ben are victims. Ben approaches Peyton, asking if he wants to go to the woods. Peyton apologizes before being shot. Ben nods at Annie before leaving the room, and the students rush to help Peyton. Annie, armed with a knife, urges them to leave the room. As they go downstairs, Liam is shot. Annie decides not to hold the door open for him as he tries to catch up. Aaron questions Annie about why she didn't hold the door open for Liam. Annie explains, admitting that the real reason was that she wasn't brave enough. The story continues. Downstairs, Dean is hiding, and Arthur is revealed to be the other shooter. Arthur instructs Beth to escape, expressing his fondness for her. Beth runs for her life as Arthur points the gun at Annie, urging her to grow a spine. He hands the gun to Annie, suggesting she shoot Dean. Unable to shoot Dean, Annie hesitates, and Arthur takes the gun, shooting Dean in the spine. Annie grabs her knife, stabbing Arthur in the neck, leading to his shock and eventual demise. Annie acknowledges that Arthur's expression was one of confusion, and to this day, she can't hold a knife without seeing his face. She recounts the day of the funeral, where people gossiped about Annie due to discrepancies in Dean's story. Dean falsely claimed that Annie was rejected because she had slept with two of his best friends and insinuated her involvement in helping Ben and Arthur plan the massacre. When Dina discovers that Annie had relationships with half the victims, she lets go of Annie's hand. Annie is labeled as a woman scorned, and even Beth distances herself from her. In the car, Dinah expresses fury towards Annie, telling her that this is why she forbade her from drinking. She conveys her deep disappointment, expressing that she is disgusted with Annie and that she is not the daughter she raised. Aaron wonders why Annie never filed charges against the boys. He points out that she is lucky to have a mother who supports her. Their interview is interrupted when Dean, in a wheelchair, enters the room, requesting to talk with Annie. However, Annie storms off, refusing to engage with him. Annie continues her story in her journal, revealing that she had to finish her next 2 years at the same school. During a New York field trip, she encounters a commanding woman who inspires her. Returning home, she informs Luke that she plans to write her own story. The next day, Annie informs her boss that she might move to London. She submits her story to her boss, intending for the New York Times to publish it. However, her boss, sharing her own experience of a non-consensual act, criticizes Annie's story as too apologetic toward the boys who took advantage of her. Annie is advised to write it as if no one would read it. During a book event, Dean talks about what happened to him, inspiring people in the audience. Annie peers between the bookshelves, observing the impact. Later, she has a private chat with Dean, who urges her not to reveal her whole truth because he has a wife and daughters. Dean initially makes excuses, blaming his actions on being drunk when he took advantage of Annie. He then issues a threat, warning Annie not to speak about that night, or he'll intensify his lies. Dean breaks down, crying and dropping his handkerchief. Annie, surprisingly, decides to help him. Annie deceived him to admit that he raped her, and all this will go away. Dean confesses, thinking that will be the end of talking about it. He confesses to raping Annie. It's revealed that Annie had recorded the entire conversation. Meanwhile, plans for the wedding move ahead. At Annie and Luke's rehearsal dinner, she receives a call notifying her that her article will be featured in the New York Times. Excitedly, she shows the article to Luke, who is upset that she didn't inform him about it beforehand. In this moment, all of Luke's little microaggressions accumulate for Annie, leading her to break off the engagement. Annie's essay goes viral, and women from around the world reach out to thank her for sharing her story, revealing that they, too, had experienced sexual assault. However, it's not all positive feedback. In the final scene of the film, Annie is stopped on the street by a woman who has reported on Dean and his work for the gun control movement. The woman acknowledges Dean's positive impact and hopes Annie's 15 minutes of fame will contribute as well. Initially stunned, Annie quickly recovers and chases the woman down, expressing Fox politeness. She then concludes the interaction by telling the woman she'll always remember her as the one she told to go fuck herself away on 5th Avenue. Satisfied that she was finally able to speak her mind and stand up for herself, Annie walks away, bringing the movie to an end. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content like this.